My name is Caesar Kaba. I'm the coordinator for Africa under the Youth Voices project. Your Public Value has instituted some discussions and interviews to try and listen to young people define their challenges and define global issues from their perspective, and also showcase the work they are doing to solve these challenges. And today we are coming your way with one of such discussions to try and listen to young people talk about what they are doing concretely to try and solve global challenges. Your Public Value is a Berlin-based NGO that seeks to promote public principles of sustainable development in terms of action for people and for the planet. And these kind of discussions are seeking to try and facilitate collaboration across the continents, Africa and Europe, and also between generations, trying to bridge the gap. Before we begin, I would like to invite all of you to introduce yourselves briefly before we start the discussion proper. Let me begin from Joanne. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joana. I am 26 years old. I am originally from Portugal, but I've been living in the Netherlands for 4 years, where I am still finishing my degree on international studies. I am an area specialist for North America, and I'm doing my minor on gender and sexuality. My connection to this topic is through my grassroots organization, well, not organization, but project here in Rotterdam called Contra. Contra aims to connect art and activism, and due to that connection, we have started to organize a yearly slut walk, which is a Women's Day march that focuses on the eradication of physical and sexual violence against women. I have been involved for a long time in this topic since I was 18. I was part of the European Youth Parliament, mainly dealing with women's rights and gender equality, but now I have been turning more to local activism, local organizing, because I believe change can come from the bottom up.
Nice to have you, Joanne. You're welcome. Let's hear from Francis.
Hello, everyone. I'm Francis Makiya. I'm a medical doctor by profession in Malawi. So I'm working with Ministry of Health as a district medical officer. And I'm also studying for my master's of philosophy in sexual and reproductive rights at the University of Victoire. I volunteer with some youth-based NGOs in Malawi, mainly working around SRHR, GBV, youth empowerment. Yeah.
Thank you. You are welcome, Francis. Nice to have you. Victoire, can we hear from you?
Yeah, hi, I'm Victoire. I'm 24 years old. I live in Berlin, Germany. I have been for a few years now. And I work as a European coordinator for Your Public Value and the Youth Voices project. And I will be co-facilitating this discussion.
Thank you, Victoire. Can we hear from Shalom?
Hello, hi everybody. My name is Shalom and I am a social worker by profession, currently living and working in Malawi at an organization called For Equality, previously known as Every Coin Square Alliance. Because of the time, we thought that's exactly what we wanted to do, ensure that girls have uninterrupted access to education. But then we soon discovered that this was bigger than just girls going to school and that there were actually more underlying issues in regards to gender equality. And so we have rebranded to For Equality. And so we're an organization that seeks to create a gender just and equal Africa. And so that's what I do. I'm also a member of She Decides Malawi, which is a global political movement that seeks to promote the decision-making power of women and girls over their own bodies.
Nice to have you, Shalom. We are glad to have all of you. Clearly, young people are not just seated and watching the problems. We can see from this brief introduction that we are all actively involved to try and make the world a better place. And this is exciting whenever we engage young people in this kind of space. It's clear that we are not just talking, we are not demanding just action, but we are also taking action ourselves. Today, our focus is on gender and its related violence. And we know per statistics that 1 in 3 women globally experience gender-based violence in their lifetime, and that is pathetic. It's unacceptable. And this goes to correlate to about 35% of all women globally that experience this kind of violence. It has to be eliminated. It has to end. And young people, civil society organizations, governments, and international organizations are taking steps to eradicate this kind of violence. Today, our focus is on the She Talks initiative in Malawi. It's going to be presented by Shalom. She will tell us what a group of young people have decided to take gender issues in their hands and solve them with their own intervention and initiative. She'll talk to us briefly about their intervention. Then we listen to participants, make comments and contributions. Then we take it from there. So I'd like to invite you, Shalom, take over the floor and make your presentation on that impressive work you are doing in Malawi.
Thank you, Caesar, and thank you, everybody. Yeah, 1 in 3 women globally actually have experienced some form of gender-based violence, and Malawi is no exception. I shared some stats with Caesar earlier saying that at least 40% of women and girls in Malawi have either been raped, had an encounter of attempted rape, unwarranted touch, just something sexual that was done to them against their will. 40% of women in Malawi, and myself included. Every day that you walk on the street, something happens, or someone says something to you. It could be about the way you're dressed. It could be the way you're walking. They always find something to say. And so it's such a deep-rooted issue, and we see it even in the way that men and boys have been socialized. So these are just deep issues that exist here. And so in 2018, my partner and I, we sat down and realized that, you know what, there's actually a lot of issues that are going on in Malawi in regards to sexual harassment. And most of the times it goes unreported. You know, you talk to young girls on the street, some of it has actually been normalized because they think, well, boys are naughty. Well, boys just do things like this to us. You know, men, oh, it was my uncle, you know, he's the one who takes care of the family. And so I can't really say anything. So we realized, okay, we need to do something about this culture of silence. We need to do something about this fear of opening up about what has happened and reporting these cases, because there are actually laws that criminalize this. It is a crime and it should not be tolerated. And so we then decided we need to come up with a platform where women and girls can feel or can realize that they have a voice, and hence the idea of the She Talks. So we want her to talk. We want she to talk about her experiences. We want she to talk about what is going on with her society, what are the ills that she can see. And we also want her to create some solutions to what is going on. What do we do about this? And so, yeah, that's essentially the idea behind the She Talks. And so we have 3 formats that we do the She Talks. The first one is the standard She Talks. And so this is where, for example, like right now, this is time for 16 days. We're just about to launch 16 days of activism in a few weeks. And so we will then sit down different NGOs and CSOs and government bodies and partners who are working in this sector to say, this is where Malawi is looking. These are the fact sheets for 2020. This is how many cases we have. This is how many people have died from this. This is how many cases of sexual harassment we have. This is what the rape situation is looking like. And actually the year for this, the theme for this year is ending rape. That's the theme that UN Women is running with. And so, you know, for Malawi, what does this look like? And so together, sitting down and coming up with solutions to say, what have we been doing in the past and what do we need to do moving forward? So at the end of the day, the She Talks is more than just she talking, but also the experiences that she has inspiring other key stakeholders to start talking about it and seeing how do we come up with solutions for this. So that's the standard format. And then we also have the community format. So this is where we go to a community and say, okay, we want to talk to a group of young girls. What is going on? You're in high school. What's going on in your school? What are some experiences that you're having? And so we allow them to share. We sit in a circle. We sit down on the floor if we must, and just have an open discussion, and we share. And so that is the She Talks community, where we're just hearing from the young girls, and then we can then use this information to feed back to either inform programming. We come up with reports and fact sheets that we share with our partners to say, this is what the girls on the ground are saying. Because what we find oftentimes in programming is that detach between the reality on the ground and what is actually being put in policies and these documents. So we're trying to bridge that gap by bringing together what the actual girls on the ground are saying and what the people who have the power to influence policy are thinking. And then the third type of She Talks that we have is the She Talks Create. So this is where she now says, okay, these are my experiences, these are the experiences of other young girls around me, and now we're going to create solutions. So this is a more interactive session where we have the key stakeholders in the room. If it's in a community, we have the rural leaders, the traditional leaders in the room, because they're responsible for the bylaws, so we need them in the room. If it's in a school, we have the head teachers, because they're responsible for ensuring order in the school. So we have everybody that's necessary to create these solutions, and then we begin to create. So yeah, essentially that's what the She Talks is about. And through the She Talk, since the onset in January of 2019, we have been able to, to start breaking the silence. Again, this is a behavioral issue. It would take years before people are actually very comfortable to open up, but we have started to have those conversations. And we've also seen groups of women in communities actually convening and saying, you know what, there's this going on, we're having these issues, and we're also seeing it expanding to even beyond just sexual harassment to other issues. Recently, we had cases actually of sex for grades in tertiary institutions where girls were being told by their lecturers that unless you agree to have a sexual relationship with me, I'm going to fail you. So what does she do? She might feel alone. She might feel like she has nobody to talk to. And so one of the things we did was develop a concept note for this to say, you know what, we need to go to these schools. We need to talk to these young people and find out what are the experiences. And we need to come up with solutions. Talk to the registrars, talk to the school administrations, find out if there are policies that speak to sexual harassment in these institutions, because some of them actually don't have sexual harassment policies. And so lecturers are free to do all of this, which is actually quite messy. Unfortunately, we didn't get any funding for that. So it's really just hanging in the air. And I think that's one of the things that we really want to do this year or the coming year, to see how we can get funding for this, because it's actually such a critical issue. And so the other thing we've also been able to do with the She Talks is have an established network of the key people that we need in dealing with sexual harassment. So everything from the victim support unit at the police to the women lawyers who've been able to handle cases pro bono for girls that need it, for girls and women that need it. We've also been able to connect with the gender justice unit that has been able to provide psychosocial help, as well as what do we call them? Shelters. Yeah, in case somebody needs to go to a shelter. Yeah, so those are some of the direct ways in which the She Talks have really been able to help women and girls in Malawi, in our community. Yep, that's about it.
Wow. This is powerful, and this is one of the few and very active young people we have across the globe that are doing what they can to stop gender-based violence. I need some time to try and digest this, and I think you also do. But I listened carefully and heard the issues being tackled from the grassroots, from community involvement to stakeholder engagement, to everything in one simple project called She Talks, and I love it.
Yeah.
This is a very powerful initiative. And before we even go ahead to take comments from participants on what you just presented, I'd like to hear from the European point of view. What are the main issues? We've heard from Shalom, rape, defilement, child marriage, and those incidences are what are very prevalent in Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. What is it for our European women and girls? What are their story? What are the problems they face? Victoire, can you speak to us about this?
Yeah, I think Joana will probably provide a more expert point of view, but from my first reaction, I would say that the problems that you encounter in Africa really echoes the ones we have in Europe, sadly, because, for example, I feel like we also have this culture of silence, because when young women and young girls go to the police, for example, to report sexual assault or rape, they are often not believed, or they experience more harassment at the police station, and that is why we have a really low rate when it comes to rape. Like not too many are reported because those women are afraid to go to the police and talk about it. So that is definitely an issue.
Then we hear from Joana from her grassroots point of view. What the issues are they different from what we heard from Victoire?
Well, like Victoire was saying, there are a lot of issues that unfortunately are similar. I want to start by talking about underreporting. That is definitely one of the problems that should be a high priority. And underreporting is basically when something happens to women or girls and they decide not to report it to not only the police, but also to organizations that could help them. And of course, that this is based on the shame culture, of the silence culture. For example, in Portugal, if I compare it to the Netherlands, because we are a much more Catholic traditional society, there is a lot of fear of what are other people going to think about this? What is this going to do to my reputation, to my family's reputation? And here in the Netherlands, even though it is what you would call a more layman society, this happens because, like you mentioned, sometimes the police simply doesn't believe what happened or doesn't know how to deal with processing these situations, these crimes. And it's sort of like a cycle. So if you know that if something happens to you, you're going to go to the police, you're going to be ridiculed, you are not going to go to the police. Someone you know is not going to go to the police. And suddenly we are with very high levels of underreporting. And this is extremely problematic because if we don't know where it's happening, we don't know how to act. So I would say that's the first problem. Then, of course, we have the lack of training, lack of understanding by part of the authorities that are dealing with this problem. What happens very often, especially with domestic violence, is that the abuse, the signs of abuse are in a lot of cases visible, and yet there is no structure to actually reach out to those women and help them out. Because, of course, if you are not putting this problem as the top of your priority in your political agenda, nothing is really going to get done. And that, of course, is extremely problematic. And then again, we go back to the circle of shame, to the circle of silence, to the circle of underreporting, and so on and so on. I also want to mention that here in the Netherlands, there are groups of women that are more exposed to sexual violence, to physical violence. We're talking about migrant women, we're talking about women of color, Black women, women that are part of this intersectional, that have intersectional identities, struggle the most because most of the times they are not only shunned by their own families, friends, but also they suffer high levels of discrimination that contribute again to this culture of shame. And of course, the last and one of the biggest problems that Shalom also mentioned is the detachment between the government authorities, the policymakers, the lawmakers, and what is actually happening on the ground. And this is a very, very big problem because this approach of going directly, talking to victims, talking to survivors, it's not really something that is done here at a global level. So the needs, the wants of this group of women that desperately need rehabilitation, need help, medical, physical, mental support, this doesn't reach them because the policymakers are not making the laws with them in mind. And then you could argue that this is because there are not enough women in politics, that are not enough women in powerful positions in these institutions. So it's a combination of institutional disconnect and, of course, the patriarchal society in which we live in. And you would be surprised to know that actually since the 90s, sexual violence has increased in the European Union. It has increased around 20% since the 90s to 2010. So we're also, and we don't have enough data yet to see how it has increased from 2010 to 2020. But of course, now with COVID-19, we're talking about women and girls being in very vulnerable situations. And I do believe that the future is reliant on initiatives like She Talks that really go to what is happening within the community. And these projects for the community, by the community, I think are essential to not only diminish this disparity between the institutional and the grassroots, but also to create solutions that are immediate and adequate to those that are unfortunately suffering from sexual violence.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Joana. Thank you, Victoire. Clearly, contrary to the perception of a difference in terms of issues from Africa and Europe, it doesn't exist. Clearly, the things that we heard from Shalom are the same things we heard from you, Joana, across the two continents. And that is how come we need more collaboration and more partnership to put an end to these challenges. Now we are going to discuss the solution in focus from Shalom. My first question to you, Shalom, will be to ask you what the challenges have been in terms of the implementation process for you, since you are trying to do a lot with little resources and all of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think definitely one of the challenges has been to get adequate funding, and that's a big need for us to do this because it's not donor funded, it's literally just, so what we do usually for the standard ones when we invite the government and other CSOs, we ask people to pay a small fee where they'll get refreshments, but it's also just to see how do we then use the proceeds to do a community one, because we can't expect people in the community to pay. And so that has kind of been the model to make sure the standard She Talks are paid for, and then the community ones can then be subsidized from this. To do this, it's something that has proven to work at the scale that we have done it, and so we wish to really just expand it. And I think another challenge has been on the part of the participants, really just issues of culture. Like I said earlier, it's culture that has taken centuries to be ingrained in people, and it's not going to take a year project to change people's minds. Yeah, so I think that sometimes is a bit of a setback where you're saying, but we were just in this community talking about this. How come they let this 48-year-old man rape a 2-year-old and didn't get him arrested? You know, then you read it in the paper and you're thinking, we just did an intervention there. So those are some of the things that can be a bit challenging. So, and again, it comes back to the issue of funding, why we need as much funding as we can so that we keep pushing and keep doing more of these. And I think another challenge has been the handling of cases, very close to what Joana and Victoire were saying, where either police don't believe victims or police actually dismiss it. We have a big problem here where somebody could go to the police to report sexual harassment or rape, and the police could actually say, well, what was she wearing? You know, and why should it matter? Why does it matter what somebody was wearing? Or it would be, oh, but you know, she's a sex worker. How can she be raped? And it doesn't make sense to them, which to me, again, I'm thinking we need to actually invest in trainings for the police. They need to be trained, they need to know these things the same way that as people in the gender space, we've also come to learn a lot. I think that we need to think about how do we also then begin to have trainings for the police so that they actually know how to handle these cases. I remember one time I went to a university and there was a panel. It was for the Spotlight Initiative for the UN, and we're discussing issues of gender-based violence. And this inspector from the police was on the panel, and he was meant to give some sort of legal / you know, from the criminalization point of view, how does it look like? And this man actually said, well, sometimes these girls ask for it. How do you wear this and do this? And I was shocked. And I thought, why is this man up there? Why is he saying things like this and telling students at a university? This is just going to be chaotic. So they need to be trained. They actually need to know, because for a lot of them, especially here in Africa, their ways of thinking are very, very informed by culture and the socialization that they've gone through. Yeah, and I think the other challenge maybe in regards to ending sexual harassment and rape, looking at it from, because we also have a group of married women who are raped, but then it's the fear of, but it's my husband, yeah, he forces me every night, but then if I report him, how am I going to eat? So those are some of the challenges where it's, again, issues of poverty and socioeconomic status preventing women from actually coming out of these harmful relationships. Yeah, and then it also links, it's actually it's crazy, because it also then links to issues of unsafe abortion, because we have these married women who are scared to negotiate sex with their husbands, and then they end up getting pregnant numerous times. They know they cannot handle these kids. Abortion is criminalized in Malawi, and so they do backdoor abortions, and next thing they don't have a uterus, and now they're in trouble with the husband, and they're getting beaten. It's so messy. So it goes beyond just this. And I think those are some of the challenges that we've had.
There are so many issues that we need to deal with as young people and as people who are usually at the receiving end, that is the women. Any comments from other participants on this wonderful project?
I want to say that funding is also a problem we have here. I think people have this idea of Europe, which is super Eurocentric, that is like, oh, Europe is this magical place where women can be free, which is absolutely not correct. And funding is a massive issue, because you are running on the lowest, trying to make everything happen, but the stress of financial sustainability impedes you from doing the work that you really want to do at the pace that you want to do it. And I really truly believe that this reason is because the reason for this is because there is no financial motivation from the governments to actually make gender equality possible. Because if this was something in which that there was interest and motivation, like, okay, we're going to solve this for women, we're going to really work on it, we're going to crack onto it, they would find the funding. But because there is no motivation from the people in power, they don't invest in the problem. Because like you said, it's so connected. Sometimes we even sound like conspiracy theorists, like, oh, this is connected to this. But it's the truth. You cannot solve one without solving the other. And for this, you need funds. You need money. You need money to do trainings. You need money to do actions. You need money to go to the schools, to make sure people participate. And it really, for me, it's like community care at this point has become the currency to really get the solutions on the road. Because even though the government is not listening, we have to somehow provide immediate help to people that are in extremely vulnerable situations. And even though that sometimes comes at great personal cost, it's not easy doing all this without being paid, without having financial, reward. Unfortunately, I see it as the way to the future, at least for a couple of years, because we're talking about reversing centuries of patriarchal cultures. So it's not just the police, it's also my best friend and my male friends and his male friends. And changing perceptions and mentalities is by far one of the hardest parts, because you can change the law. That is possible. But then how do you change a whole culture? It's at least what we're trying to do here in Rotterdam is really to create the structures within our community to make sure that whoever we can help out, we're going to help out. But of course, it's also a vulnerable position for us, because we're talking about people who also are survivors of sexual violence, people that have encountered this in their lives. And it makes it very difficult without the institutional support.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that I really do agree with what Joana just said, especially on we need to build an investment case for this, because sometimes that's the only way our governments begin to understand these things. If you tell them we need to educate girls, for example, they'll say, yeah, and then what? And, but if you tell them by educating 60% more girls than we currently are, we're going to increase the GDP by 25%, they'll say, oh, okay. That's more exports, therefore more money, and they might be able to understand it in that sense better. So yeah, we definitely need to build an investment case.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Francis, do you have any comments?
Yes, yes, Caesar. Just to comment a bit about what She Talks are doing, it's a very nice initiative in Malawi where just talking about sex or mentioning the word sex, it's not very common. People consider it as a taboo, but the She Talks is disrupting the status quo, sort of challenging the society power imbalance, because due to power imbalance, I think this is where most issues stem from: the unequal treatment, viewing another person as lesser than another. So, in Malawi, a society where most of the decisions are made by men, most positions are filled by men, it's sort of an initiative that is now coming in to change that perspective, to disrupt the status quo and sort of end the gendered violence towards women. And one other thing I think that's very important in gender-based violence, specifically sexual violence, I think it's linkage to support services. What I've observed and seen is that oftentimes the perpetrators are usually acquaintances of these victims, like 2/3 of the time it's someone they know. But then to report the case, it's usually problematic. Usually it's the neighbors reporting and all that. And now when maybe the case comes to like the hospital or the police, now for the victim to be linked to proper services, most of the time it's a problem. I think that's where now the concept of one-stop center came in. But for Malawi, the issue is that we have a few one-stop centers, like in a few districts, not all the districts. As much as these other districts are trying, I think I only know about 2 or 3 who have one-stop centers fully equipped with all the officers available: police, social welfare, health care workers, counselors. But then the other districts are still lagging this key element, because you don't want victims to suffer unnecessarily burden of going to and from offices, because the more we increase red tape and the bureaucracy, the longer we prolong the longer we delay the necessary interventions to the victims. And I think it also affects how victims perceive the care they get, as well as even the perception of the community in general. So linkage to key services is very important. And for Malawi, I think we are trying, but we haven't really reached that level where we can say we have fully established structures to link victims to the necessary support services. And the other key thing I think is also on in reintegration. After providing all the support to the victims, linking them to police, health, social services. Now the part of reintegration, like making sure that the victims reintegrate properly into the society. Because I think oftentimes we just focus in the immediate issues, like treating the physical complications or maybe offering psychotherapy, like in the immediate. But oftentimes we're giving them on track, like following them up Like, sometimes people get post-traumatic PTSD, post-traumatic distress. To me, I think linking victims to necessary care as well as reintegrating them into society, these are very, very important. And of course, we need funding, like what my colleagues have highlighted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis. Like me, I'm usually excited to hear men talk about sex and gender-based violence. And very soon I'll come to Francis to hear what you think the role of men is to end this canker of SGBV, sex and gender-based violence, because more often we are seen as the perpetrators of these crimes. And so it will be important that we start these interventions in our circle. But before then, I'd like to hear from Shalom on the two main key things that Francis mentioned: linkage to service and reintegration. What is your project doing in this regard to try and put things in place?
Okay, thank you. So in regards to linkage to services, the She Talks has been able to create sort of like a database, the Gender Justice Unit. We also have the Victim Support Unit from the police. And then we also have a number of counselors that are working pro bono to provide support services. And so usually what happens is we let people know of how they can reach out, a number that they can reach out to should they need help, and then we can connect and refer to say, okay, this sounds like a legal case, therefore I will connect you to Women Lawyers Association. This sounds like, you need some therapy, you need some counseling, and then we'll connect them to the counseling services. So we've been able to network because I think like the Women Lawyers, the Victim Support Unit, Gender Justice Unit, they were able to also then be willing to support the She Talks, knowing that their services are actually directly in line with what we were doing and what we were offering. And so that's, in terms of the referrals, that is what we have been able to do. In terms of reintegration back into community, aside from the counseling, we have not done anything else in regards to that. I'll be very open to hearing maybe from the team here, what are some suggestions that you have on how we could better do this. But yeah, aside from counseling, we have not done much in regards to reintegration into the community. And I do think it's a very valid point. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's well to note that there's something positive coming out of this discussion that we can use to improve the She Talks campaign. We'll be hearing from the other participants what they think you can do to try to improve this. But like I said, I like to hear again from Francis briefly on the issue of men and boys' involvement in the sex and gender-based violence fight. What do you think we should do briefly as men and as boys to try and help bring this to an end?
Men I think they have a key role to end sexual-based, gender-based violence. Men usually in society have more power, and because of the patriarchal setup, positioned in advantaged positions, if I may use that word. Oftentimes, if men don't realize that there is a patriarchal setup and they need to change the setup, then it becomes a problem. So men have a role to sort of take responsibility for how much power they have, so that they sort of realize and come in to sort of now be that change. If, for example, a man is in a position like, for example, executive director, they should know the powers they have and the influence they have, and then sort of now be that positive change, because from these power imbalances, that's where now, issues start to come in of violence. And at the same time, we need to, apart from taking responsibility, we also have to, educate ourselves as men. What is it about gender-based violence? What is it about sexual gender-based violence? And sort of educate other men as well. So it's not just about educating the girls, but we also have to reach out to the men and boys specifically, educate them about these issues. And we should also learn to talk to each other talk to other men about gender-based violence. Oftentimes these issues we don't talk about, but we need to sort of change the approach and sort of now start to talk about these issues. Oftentimes, people normalize the situation. If a boy rapes a girl, usually the story is that the girl is the victim, but people don't realize that the perpetrator, who is a boy, is the one who is at fault. So we need to change the narrative, and men should be in forefront, taking that responsibility, which at the moment does not happen. Oftentimes, you find that men always like sort of protect each other in a way. They'll always bag each other up. If there's a rape case, most of the men will not blame the male counter, but they will say, the girl was walking at midnight, she was wearing a miniskirt, or she was drunk, and all that. So that narrative has to change.
Thank you very much, Francis. Francis says men should take over action. They should get informed and take action to stop these issues of violence. Victoire, can we hear from you on any question or comment?
Yeah, I actually had a question related to what Francis just said, because forever we have been teaching girls how, like, not to wear miniskirts at night, not to walk alone and whatsoever. And I just wanted to know how we could push for this engagement of boys. It can be in Africa, but also in Europe, because we just talked about getting them to talk about these issues and try to make them aware of the problems. But are there concrete solutions or concrete ways that we can do that? Because for now they are benefiting from this system, so why would they change? Like,
okay,
yeah,
Victoire, yes, it's a question. Before I take any answers or comments from other participants, I'd like to say that the issue of victim blaming is one of the major issues, as mentioned by Francis and Victoire, and it's often framed as if men are supposed to be protected from women. Instead of telling them not to do the wrong thing, we justify issues of rape and harassment from a man being exposed to what is attractive, which I think is orientation. We need to begin to let people understand that issues of sex, issues of sexual intercourse is not a one-person decision. You're supposed to take it with the other partner to be enjoyed by both. If we are able to project this to young people and to men to understand, then we can put a stop to it. We more often deal with statistics and all of that. We should begin to link issues of SGBV directly to people who are perpetrators of these crimes. When you rape a lady to get pregnant, the burden on society increases and all of us get to suffer. The issues are not too far from any of us. We have to begin first and foremost to educate men to understand the issues themselves. But for me, I also believe that even before that education happens, the issues that women and girls face are better understood by them. And so when programming and other interventions are being done, we don't invite women to just listen to them, but we are supposed to put them on the decision-making table to take action themselves. Because it's only on that perspective or from that perspective that they can better understand what they feel, what the problems are, and better bring solutions to them. When Shalom was speaking, you can clearly know that this is a person who understands the issues. I, Francis, and other men can pretend to understand, but do we really understand the issues women go through? I don't think. And so for me, it's about not just involvement, but women leading action and involving men in the process. If anyone has any further comments on Victoire's comments or question, let's hear from you.
Maybe just to briefly add to what Caesar said. Yeah, I think it's possible to make men take responsibility for their actions. We need to change the narrative, and it goes back to issues of power in society. So when we are doing our interventions, we always have to, do power analysis. Who holds power in this society? What are the, key influencing factors to the behaviors in such a society, so that we sort of have an intervention that fits such a society. And I believe men, if they're educated properly on these issues, they should be able to take responsibility, at the same time act as advocates to end such behaviors. We have seen it in child marriages. People use champions. Yeah, they use champions to go around communities. The same can also be we can borrow a leaf from such interventions to sort of find who holds power in society, like which men can sort of actively advocate to end these vices. So it's possible.
Thank you very much. It is possible. We need to take action. I can see Shalom wanted to make a comment.
But Francis has kind of said it. But I was going to say that, yeah, I think Victoire said something powerful to say, how can they want to end it if they're benefiting from it, And yeah, that makes everything tricky. I think one way would be champions, like Francis has said, and sometimes not even champions, just as guys like you, Caesar, and you, Francis, the next time you're around a group of guys and they're talking about, oh, look at what she's wearing, she's asking for it, just holding them to account and saying, no, she's not asking for anything. She's dressed the way that she wants to be. So just encouraging for those young men and boys that do know what it is, just encouraging them to keep holding other guys accountable as well. Yeah.
We need to stand up for women and make it clear that what they wear is not an invitation for sex. They wear what they feel comfortable in, and it's not their fault.
I've remembered.
Yes, then speak.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was going to say that sometimes the people who also push these patriarchal ideas are, the patriarchy princesses, the women who do it. I know sometime at a conference, someone was sharing about how her mom tells her around the house, no, you need to wrap yourself. You can't wear that when your father and your brothers are around. Why? Like, what does that say about it? So you find sometimes it's actually women as well. And I guess that comes back to the issue of culture that also propel these kind of ideas that men cannot control themselves. So even if you're around the house, you need to have a wrapper around your waist. Otherwise, you're going to entice your brothers or your father. So I think, yeah, men have a lot of work to do in breaking these, but I think also women have a lot of work, especially women who hold the negative things, the not so nice things about our culture. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Shalom. I can see, I detect, Joanna, you have something to say?
Two things. So when we are organizing the Women's Day March here in Rotterdam, the most frequently asked question is, are men welcome? So men ask us when we're doing like media meetings or interviews, it's always, are men welcome? And honestly, every time I'm shocked by this question, because you are the largest rate of perpetrators are men. So of course you are not just welcome, you are necessary, you are needed, because you are part of the solution. This cannot happen without you because you are the one that is causing all this violence. So I think it goes, education is the most important thing from when they are small. Everything I think contributes to this patriarchal society. In Portugal, when you are tiny and you're growing up and a boy hits you, you go to your mom and your mom tells you, oh no, he's just hitting you because he likes you. And of course, this is going to materialize later on your mind, on your idea of self-worth and your idea of respect. And it's going to contribute to what Shalom also said, to women also not knowing what they are worth and not being able to stand up for themselves, not being able to access the networks of support that they need. And of course, the shaming of other women, which is very, very unfortunate that you still have women that believe, for example, feminism is a hoax. They believe the queer agenda is just here to turn us all gay. And it's educating these people, continuously reaching out and having these difficult conversations. Because a lot of things that I hear, a lot of what I hear in the community is like, oh, I don't want to have discussions with someone that is so against the ideas that I believe in. But unfortunately, this discussion, this labor is necessary because you need to talk with these men, with these women that don't believe that this is a problem. If you're a woman and you've been dealing with harassment, sexual violence all your life, it is very common that you kind of reverse it and you think, okay, I've survived because I'm strong. And the other women that are all complaining, they're not as strong as me. Therefore, it's not a problem that I experience. And I think what we need to keep pushing forward is that there is no universal experience of femininity. There is no universal experience of being a woman. You need to hear these different stories and you need to kind of bring them to our male counterparts and show them that what you are doing has a long-lasting effect in the lives of a lot of women. And the second thing I wanted to say is about what Shalom was saying. How can we keep in touch with survivors, with communities after the workshops are done? How do we keep them engaged? Something that has worked very well here in Rotterdam is support groups. And these are like informal gatherings, with some food, where women come together. We have one moderator, someone that knows a little bit about group dynamics, talking about these experiences in an informal way. And there is no purpose of it. There is, we're not going to record it. We're not going to write about it. We're just going to sit down and talk about it. And maybe we're just going to talk about things that hurt us. But this is very important because processing pain, processing trauma is a continuous work, especially if you experience sexual violence. Another thing that we do is create events that are connected to art, to crafts, things that are not necessarily related to sexual violence, but again, that contribute to this processing of pain and to cope with the patriarchal society that women exist in. So I think art is also can be a very therapeutical feature when processing pain and trauma. But to be very honest, again, lack of funding is a problem. These things require money, they require a space. But I think even if we have informal gatherings with women, where we're just going to talk about our stuff, I think this already helps because it makes them feel less alone. And that's a very also part of the problem, the self-isolation. I am the only one to deal with this. It's my fault. It's my fault. And again, this is where the role of men come in. You are also part of this change, and it's really nice to hear men like Francis and Caesar really talk about it. It's so nice and refreshing because men really underestimate their role in this. And I hope that with this conversation, it's also a call to action to males everywhere. Take charge. Like, you are part of this, and we need you to solve this.
Thank you very much. We need men to solve this because they are a major proportion of global population. Shalom, I like to hear from you on that comment. what do you think you've been doing right to involve men? Are men welcome in She Talks? What do you do to involve men in your conversation?
Yeah, men are welcome. Again, it also depends on the nature of the She Talks and where it's happening and why. So for example, let's say the She Talks on campuses in regards to sexual harassment of female students by lecturers. Because of the nature of the sensitivity, we might not want to just throw in the boys in there. We would want to maybe have some time with the girls and just talk about these issues. And then with their consent, if they're okay with having the guys in there, maybe for the second one or the third one, to say, okay, maybe now we can bring in the boys to see how can we work together to end this on campus, then we can involve them. So we always evaluate to see, do we need men in this particular one, or can we then bring them in later on as allies? Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Nice to hear that you have not left our men and our male friends out in your project. Now, we are going to close shortly, but before we end the discussion, I'd like to hear from all of us. First, Shalom, what do you think participants of this discussion can do concretely to assist your project and the actions you are taking in Malawi? And to the other participants, what do you think you can do to assist Shalom in what she's doing in Malawi? So let's hear first from Shalom. What do you think we can do together as young people, as viewers who are also watching us on YouTube and our social media channels? What can we do to assist you to do and become more successful? Yeah.
Okay, so I think for starters, perhaps helping with pointing out where we might be lacking, for lack of a better word. For example, the issue of reintegration. That's not really something we had focused on, but I was able to hear it from the team. And so now I'm thinking, okay, how do we refine our model to a point where we also look at how do we reintegrate? So how do we refine our model to a point where it's very holistic and we ensure that people who are benefiting from the She Talks can be reintegrated back into the community? So I think just assisting with, what can we do to make it better? And we're also interested in taking the model to other places. And so I think if anybody would wish to do so, they can get in touch with me and then we can talk about what that would look like. Because at the end of the day, the goal is to really better the lives of women and girls. And so, yeah, we're very interested in that as well. So if anyone would want to, please reach out and I'll be happy to share how we can work together.
Thank you very much. So it's a call to action and an invitation for partnership and collaboration to us as participants, to our viewers watching. Get in touch. We can link you up to Shalom. And we extend the model to other places and other communities to benefit. Now let's hear from the other participants, Victoire, Joana, and Francis. What can we do from our own perspective to assess this model and to increase it?
I think these talks already are very important, especially if you work for a grassroots organization, grassroots projects. You tend to self-isolate because, of course, you're always very busy. You're always trying to get it all in. And I think already these tools of cooperation, of knowledge exchange, are extremely important. At least to me, they are. Listening to what other participants are doing in their own very particular social contexts. I think it's important because, women of the world unite. This is not just something we are doing locally. This needs to become, and I think it will become, a global movement. Intersectionality is the future. And I think the more we link up to each other, the more power we can gain, and the more we can also understand our own flaws. Because, despite us being women, we still have problems in our own communities. We have racism, we have queerphobia, we have misogynoir. So I think keeping up this work and keeping up international ties and cooperation is important, and I want to just thank everyone for their input. It's been really great.
Thank you very much. It has been an exciting conversation with all of us, hearing what we are doing concretely to try and end gender-based violence, which I believe is affected by and also affects any other aspect of our lives as women, as men, socioeconomic development, and even relationships. And so it's exciting to hear that young people are taking action themselves to try and decide and form a future for ourselves and try and eliminate the practices and incidences that we do not like. We hope that this conversation will not be the end, but it will foster some collaboration between all of us and among all of us here, especially in Africa and Europe, trying to come together to solve a problem that is a global one. We are excited to have you. We thank you very much for your inputs and wonderful ideas. We'll share contacts after this, and let's keep in touch. Let's try to link up and collaborate. Let's do something together. We hope this will spark some conversation and action, which will be a collective one. Thank you very much. And it was nice having all of you.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Caesar.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.